Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Meiser Sheni, Pedig Dalit Halacha Hey, and it's a small daf today. I hope to also start at least today Halacha Vav, which will be on Daf Mem Gimel, and Daf Mem Gimel is a bit bigger. Everything will balance itself out, God willing. So we're learning today Daf Mem Beis. We left off on Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph, second line from the top of the Amid in the beginning with the Gemara. The Mishnah had two cases. First, the Mishnah spoke about when a person partially used, as an example, an Isser coin in, let's say, in one's original location, a person used half of it to redeem Peiros Meiser Sheni, then the person went to a new location. In this new location, either what he brought with him, the Isser, is worth double or it's worth half. And the Mishnah had a simple rule, is that if you had half free, wherever you are, whatever that half is worth in the current location, it is that you are able to redeem. Sometimes to your benefit, sometimes to your detriment. The beginning of today's daf will simply point out from our Mishnah what is the value of a pudyoin, that it's clear from our Mishnah that one pudyoin is worth two isarim. That's Pashat, what comes out from the Mishnah. We're going to spend some time today pointing out the following phenomena. Normally, we try to give complete numbers. So when we had on the Mishnah the concept that when you see A'ama Aretz being poida his Meiser Sheni, the example the Mishnah gave was, you see the Am Ha'aretz redeeming one Isser's worth of produce onto an Isser. That for sure, that makes it clear that this Am Ha'aretz at this time separated from the produce an Isser's worth, which means that he began with 10 Isser's worth that he felt has to be fixed when it comes to Meiser Sheni, from which he removed one Isser. Question is, can you now assume, since right now he took care of Meiser Sheni, did he also take care of Meiser Rishon? Now, if indeed we say that he did, which is the Shita of the Tanakama, which is the Shita of Beis Hillel, if we knew that he started with Tevel Vadai, the Mishnah simply wants to know how much produce did he start out with? And you can't say, well, he started out with 10 Isser's worth. No, of course not. The one Isser of Meiser Sheni came from 10 Isser's worth of produce. That's Tevel Meiser Sheni. But if we're going backwards, it's called reverse engineering. If we're saying, as we do L'Tanakama, that this person also removed Meiser Rishon, what was the amount of the worth of the produce that he began with, from which he first separated Meiser Rishon, and then he remained with 10 Issers, from which now he removed one, which is 10%, for Meiser Sheni. And the Mishnah said that he started out with 11 Issers worth, 11, and 1/9 of an Isser. And the Gemara is going to wonder, why don't we say 1/10 of an Isser? This is a simple mathematical illustration, all based on one rule. And that is, and let's not forget that Meiser Rishon is a 10th, yes. Meiser Sheni is a 10th, yes. But when you remove the 10th, what is now rectified? Not 10, only 9. If I have 10 Issers worth of Tevel or Meiser Sheni, and now I removed Meiser Sheni, I don't have now 10 Issers worth of Chulin Misukanim. No, I only have 9. Same thing is, if prior to having 10 Issers worth of Tevel only La Meiser Sheni, prior to that, I also needed to remove Meiser Rishon. So as we'll see, when I removed, if I had 10 and I removed 1, how much is fixed? Only 9. For me to have more than that, I need to have more, correct? When I have 1 Isser's worth and I remove from it 10% to be Mesakin it, how much do I have left that's Mesukin? Not a whole Isser, only 9/10. So the only way, so there's always going to be less than an Isser. In order for me to have complete 11 isers plus a bit, we'll see that when you take an iser and you don't break it into 10 parts, but you only break it into 9 parts, and you remove 1/9, we'll see, which is exactly what the Mishnah is saying, that you started out with 11 isers plus 1/9 of an iser. That will give you a cheshbon where everything will become a sukkah, and there won't be a little bit that still has to be rectified, as we'll see. It's a very simple illustration. The Gemara from there is also going to point out that our Mishnah only follows one version of what the Tanakama said, of what Beis Hillel says, what Beis Shammai says. There are other versions of who said what. We have in Masechtas Demai a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim explicitly about our topic, which is Rabbi Eliezer is the one that says that Haneman ala Sheni, Neman ala Rishon, which is exactly the Shita of our Mishnah, of the Tanakama, which is exactly what our Mishnah says, Lebeis Hillel by Tevel Vadai. The Chachamim say, over there in Demai, that even if you know someone is Neman on Sheni, doesn't mean he's Neman on Rishon. Makes a lot of sense. Because if someone is looking to cut corners, it's easier to separate Meiser Sheni, because Meiser Sheni you keep, Meiser Rishon you separate to give away. And therefore it's going to chap that our whole Mishnah is only following Shitas Rabbi Eliezer and not Shitas Chachamim, as we'll see. The one thing that's unresolved is our Mishnah is having this whole machlokes. He separates Meiser Sheni. Doesn't mean that he also separated Meiser Rishon, right? Let's go to Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says not. But let me ask you a question, Aviv. This Meiser Sheni itself, Meiser Sheni he separated, right? So if you see him redeeming 1 iser's worth of Meiser Sheni, we're saying that there are now 9 iser's worth of produce that's mesukan la Meiser Sheni. Correct? Correct. When I want to eat that, I'm the chavir, and I want to eat that. If I'm going to follow the sheet of the Chachamim or Beis Shammai, who he's not Neman ala Rishon, can I eat that Meiser Sheni itself? Or even from that Meiser Sheni itself, I have to remove what should have been the Meiser Rishon. What's our Mishnah is not talking about eating the Meiser Sheni. Our Mishnah wants to know whether you can buy even more produce, because he started out with more produce if he fixed Meiser Rishon. The Gemara is going to ask, okay, even if you're going to go according to the opinions l'chumra that haneman ala sheni einoi neman ala rishon, maybe it only means that you can eat beyond what was fixed for Meiser Sheni. Who says he removed Meiser Rishon for that, but for the Meiser Sheni proper, maybe everyone will agree that you could eat.
Oh, wait, we can't ask him, or we don't trust him to ask him.
Exactly, very good, Kevin. And by the way, there's a brisa that says that when you ask him befedish, there's a brisa that says that when it comes to pidyon, not to separation, that an Amaretz who says, I was poida, my Meiser Sheni, he's redeemed. We'll see that. This is going to be the...
Is there any leeway in the 10% that we have for Meiser Sheni, like there is for Truma is not an exact number, but Meiser Rishon is an exact number. Is Meiser Sheni also an exact number?
Yes, it
or
is.
Can it be
yes,
a little
it is.
more...
Meiser Al-Tarbala Aser Umadois also goes to Meiser Sheni. It's important. That's why the Mishnah is giving you even fractions. If we'll have time today, which I hope we will, we're going to start Halacha Vav, which will be on Daf Mem Gimel. And Halacha Vav is just very simple. When you find coins, do you ever have to suspect that these coins might be Meiser Sheni coins? And we'll see. Depends where you find them. Depends what time of the year. Then when it was common by us, by Yidden, that if you had a wallet, a keli that had in it coins that were either hegdish or truma or Meiser Sheni, you would write on it a mem, a kuf, mem for Meiser, kuf for carbon, even though carbon doesn't mean carbon. It meant hegdish, but that's the way they wrote it. But maybe the cup, the keli, is the hegdish. Who says the contents are hegdish? We're going to get into all of that. We'll see how far we can get in the Mishnah. Okay. So a lot of the big bulk of today's daf is numbers, but it's easy. The Gemara is making easy points. So number 1, daf membeis, right? Gemara, Tani Rabbi Chia. First of all, objectively, you should know when it comes to how much is a pudyon Worth, what does it represent? That 2 Isarin, I always get confused with the Sroi Nois. The Sroi Nois is the measure, Midas Hayavesh, that they used in the Beis HaMikdash, right, for flour. But Isarin, 2 Isarin is in 1 Pudyon. And that's mamish what you see from our Mishnah. So that's a beraisa. Amar Rabbi Yosi, Amoira, oh, Masnis, Amra Kain. Good, not explicitly, but we know that from our Mishnah. The Mishnah said in the first case, you designated an Isser to be used to redeem produce of Ma'aser Sheni. V'achal olav chetziyoi, and half of it is still open to be used. And you went to another place, and that same coin, the mashal that we gave is that in your original location was valuable enough to buy 10 te'enim. But you went to a new place where that same iser could be used to buy 20 te'enim. Double. So the Mishnah says, so the half that remained is again an iser. Oichel olav iser. For that to make sense, it must be that a pudyon is 2 isarins. And indeed, that's taka what we see from our Mishnah. Okay, now we're going to go L'shitas Tanakama and L'shitas Beis Hillel, moving on to the second part of the Mishnah. All you saw was the Amaretz redeeming 1 Iser's worth of produce Ma'aser Sheni onto the coin. That's what you see. So, number 1, if you see him redeeming, what does that prove, Aviv? That he separated. If he separated an Iser's worth of produce, how much did he start out with prior to separating it? Easy. If you see me separating 1 Iser's worth of produce, lim Ma'aser Sheni, so how much do I have left? 9. Very good. Or if the Mishnah is never looking at the number that I have now. The Mishnah is going reverse engineering. What did I start out with? If you see me separating 1 Iser's worth of produce, L'Maiser Sheni, then how much did I begin? How much did I start out with prior to separating Maiser Sheni? 10. I'm saying the same thing you're saying. I just want to make the Mishnah. Now, let's go further. Reverse engineering. Tanakama holds, this guy now, not yesterday, not tomorrow. Now, fact that you see a person who's an Amaretz, who we have a suspicion, maybe he doesn't do it properly. The fact that we see from the Pidyon that he separated Maiser Sheni, we go more. If he separated produce L'Maiser Sheni, that's a raya. That what? That he also separated Ma'aser Rishon. So how much did he start out with? Just reverse engineer. For him now to only have to separate 1 Isur L'Maiser Sheni, if prior to that, Aviv, he separated Ma'aser Rishon, you get the kasha? What's the number? So the Mishnah says 11 Isarins and 1/9. 1/9 means that we're taking in a Isarin, we're dividing it into 9 parts. The whole Isarin is 9 out of 9, and 1/9. Okay? The way the Mishnah words it, if you want to just look in the words of them, it's very unusual that Isur, I'm sorry, Achadasar Isur, 11, ve'echad mimeya be'isur. Ve'echad mimeya means that from every 1, Aviv, listen to this, from every 1 Isur, you separate 1/100ths. And since you have 11 Isurs, so you have 11 100ths. That is 1 out of 9. Just to get how we get. In other words, I'm going to go from now on, I'm going to say 1 out of 9. The Mishnah actually says that you began with the value of produce. After Truma Gedoyla, 3 Ma'aser Rishon, that is worth 11, right? Can't be 10. Why can't it be 10? Because if you only separated 1 Isser from Ma'aser Sheni Aviv, right? That means that after Ma'aser Rishon, you had 10 left. Okay, after you took off Ma'aser Rishon. But how much did you have before you took off Ma'aser Rishon? So it's going to work exact that you had 11 Isarins and 1/9. How much 11 and 1/9 is now Ma'aser Rishon? How much of that is Ma'aser Rishon? 1 and 1/9. Even though it's not exact, it's very close to that. 1 and 1/9. Now you have left only 10. From that 10, you took off 1. And that's the amount. In other words, when I want to buy produce from the Amoritz, I want to buy, let's say, 6 Isers worth. So the Tanakama says you could. And when you take it, you don't have to be concerned about anything. Truma Gedola, you are never concerned from an Amoritz. And as long as it fits in the remaining of the 11 and 1/9, because don't forget, it's not that we're saying that the Amoritz currently has Misukandika produce in the value of 11 and 1/9. He does not have it right now, because from this 11 and 1/9, he gave 2 Isers and 1/9 L'maiser Rishon, L'maiser Sheni. Really, what we're saying is that you can get from him 9 Isers worth, but you don't have to be worried about not even Maiser Rishon. So okay, we're good. So Shmuel Amar Zak Shmuel. The Mishnah could not have taught the same din. Now he's not elaborating. Normally, we always give the number 10. 9 is like a very unusual number. In other words, what the Gemara is asking, what Shmuel is addressing, why didn't the Mishnah say that you started out with 11 Isers and 1/10 of an Iser? Why wouldn't you start out with that? What's the 1/9? So shows the Gemara Daf Mem Beis Amud Beis that in Yisav Chad LaAsara you can't give this number. Let me go. I have produce. I have to separate my sedition. So I'm saying 11 and something. Okay, before we get to the something, I have 11. I have 10. How much do I have to separate from the 10? 1. So how much did I fix? Only 9. If I want to fix 11, how much do I have to separate? But how much do I have left? I'm always going to have a point something. Why will I always have a point something? If I want to say that I had exactly 10 Isers to separate from it 1 L'maiser Sheni, how did I get to exactly 10 Isers? Normally, when you separate Maiser Rishon, you're not going to have a rounded number left.
You get 9.9.
You're going to have 9.9. No, it's for every Isur. If you separate just the normal 10% from every Isur, you didn't rectify that Isur. You only rectified a 0.9 of that Isur. In Yisav Chad LaAsara, if you take an Isur's worth for 10 Isarains, then you didn't rectify it all. If you start out, then Tzarech L'Meisav Chada L'Ma'as. Then you have to still separate. If you have left 0.1, which is 10%, but if you want to rectify that, you have to take from that how much? 10% from the 10%, which is 1 out of 100th. But that also didn't fix all of it, because then that also only fixed 90% of it. In Yisav Chada L'Ma'as, now you have to give Tzarech L'Meisav Chada L'Elef. And there's no end to it. So the only cheshbon that will allow you to remain with a completed isur after you separated the Maiser Rishon is if you started out with a 9th worth. If instead of you starting out normally at dividing an isur into 10, you divide an isur into 1 out of 9, and if you separated that 1 out of 9, then you fixed the entire Isser. And that's why the Mishnah gave that you started out with the value of 11 Issers and 1/9 of an Isser, and not 1/10 of an Isser. And go make the cheshbon and you'll see that it's exactly that way.
But that tells you that you didn't separate Maser Rishon, because he would never do such a calculation.
Number one, Kevan, for sure he separated Maiser Rishon. But how did he come to a point where he separated exactly 1 Isser L'Maiser Sheni? Must be that he started out with pre-Maiser Rishon, the worth of 11 Issers and a 9th of an Isser.
I'm just saying, because the calculations are so complicated to him, he would just skip it and move on.
No, we're not saying that.
Also, by the way, 11 and a 9th, less Meiser is not. It's very close to 10, but it's not exactly 10.
Exactly. What's lot you're saying, Emes? Correct. It's not exact, but it's closer. And
It's
that's
very
why,
close.
that's
It's
right.
very close.
Very good. Very good. And that's exactly what we're saying. You take out a calculator, just see. You take 11 and a ninth and take out from it 10%, and you're going to be very close to 10. Now you're going to be very close to 10. And that's why he gave one isser from the 10. Okay, beside it. Okay, now who says what? Also good to know. So Tani Bar Kapara is an Amoira, but he had a Braisa. And he's saying that you got it wrong. Who says what? What we have in our Mishnah, Shitas Beis Hillel, according to the Tani Bar Kapara, that is what Beis Shammai says. Beis Shammai is the one that says that only if and when you know that this produce started out as Tevel Vadai. I want to say another detail. Whenever you hear the number 11, it doesn't mean 11 exact. It means 11 and the 1/9. The Mishnah just doesn't want to repeat the fraction. Bevadai achadasar. Bishamai is the one that says that demai, only when you know that we started with demai, being that separating anything from demai is only a rabbinic, that is where we don't say, oh, he separated Ma'aser Sheni, he separated Ma'aser Rishon. That we don't trust that. So all that you fixed was only 10. And Beis Hillel oimrim, bein b'demai, bein b'vadai, what we have in our Mishnah, Shitas Tanakama, Bar Kapara has Shitas Beis Hillel, bein b'demai, bein b'vadai, achadoser hein. Achadoser hein means 11 plus a ninth, which what you started out with. Not what remained. That's how much you started out with, because we're saying the bottom line is that we even trust that you fixed Ma'aser Rishon as well. So in our Mishnah, we have three opinions: the Tanakama, Beis Shammai, and Beis Hillel. By Bar Kapara, there's no Tanakama. The Tanakama is Beis Hillel. There's only two opinions. And Beis Shammai says like Beis Hillel. And in Tana Bar Kapara, we don't have anyone who's that machmer that says we always say that you're not Neman al Rishon. That we don't have. Now, says the Gemara, Hoide Rabbi Yudan beRabbi Shalom kahadad Tani Bar Kapara aliba de Beis Shammai. How amazing is that? Which works. In other words, we have a tradition. Let's go like this, Aviv. Whose version? What is it? No one paskins like Beis Shammai. When Rabbi Yudan is saying, I paskin like Beis Shammai, yeah, of course, because he's saying that if you're going to follow the version of Tani Bar Kapara, then we paskin like Beis Shammai. You know why? Because Rabbi Yudan but Rabbi Shalom is saying we follow the version of our Mishnah. And in our Mishnah, Beis Hillel says what the Tani Bar Kapara says, Beis Shammai says. Since we paskin like Beis Hillel, so either say we paskin like our Mishnah's version of Beis Hillel, or you can say we paskin like Tani Bar Kapara's version of Beis Shammai, which is the same thing. Which is that only when you know that it was Tevel Vadai are we more lenient. Then we say Haneman al Sheni, Neman al Rishon. But if you started out with the Demai, in the case where you know you started out with Demai, since it's only Demai, then we suspect that Amma Aretz. He's not going to go that far out. Okay. Now, the words Neman al Rishon, Neman al Sheni, we don't have here in Masechtas Ma'aser Sheni. What we have over here is Tanakama Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Be'emes, there is a clear braisa that quotes a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim regarding these words, whether you're Neman al Sheni, whether you're Neman al Rishon. This machlokes is both a Masechtas Peah, it's a Tosefta, it's a braisa, and it's a Masechtas Demai. That means we learned it. So says our Gemara, let's go with our version. We just paskin like our Mishnah's version, okay? And again, what does the Tanakama say? Let's go with the Tanakama. Yeah, that if you see him being poida a Isser's worth of Ma'aser Sheni, we know, reverse engineer, that he started out with 11 Isserins and a ninth of an Isser. Okay, so that is Shitas Rabbi Eliezer. Our Mishnah follows Ki Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer is the one that says that Neman al Sheni, Neman al Rishon, meaning that according to the Chachamim of that Beraisa, no one will say that you can assume that 11 Issers were freed up. No, only 10. Okay. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosi, I disagree with you. Don't make our Mishnah only following Shitas Rabbi Eliezer, Nishtazoi. Our Mishnah will follow even the Chachamim that say Neman ala Sheni, Einoi Neman ala Rishoin. Now again, this is something, Aviv, let's go that we don't say that 11 Isers were fixed. But I want to know regarding the Meiser Sheni itself. When I have this Meiser Sheni, which you redeemed, do you have to be concerned about Meiser Rishon on the Meiser Sheni? And there's a logic. This is crazy.
Is that called not on Ala Seder? Because we're assuming he did Meiser Sheni before Meiser Rishon, basically.
According to the Chachamim in the Braisa, that Haneman ala Sheni ein Haneman ala Rishon means, Danny, that we're saying that this guy Bechlal didn't take off Meiser Rishon.
But it is effective, right? The Meiser Sheni.
It's only effective for Meiser Sheni, correct. Very good. Now, 1 second. If he's not Neman ala Rishon, so did he begin with 10 Isers worth? Did he begin with 11 Isers worth? I get that. But I want to know something. This Iser that he redeemed, right? Can you eat it now? I would say that if you say Neman ala Sheni and Einoi Neman ala Rishon, then you can't even eat this Iser. Even for this Iser, you have to remove 10% from it from Meiser Rishon, which you are saying the guy didn't remove. Our Gemara is saying perhaps not. Perhaps when you are not looking at the Meiser Sheni itself, we have a machlokes tanoim, whether he did take off Rishon, whether he didn't take off Rishon. But there is a logic to say regarding the Sheni itself that everyone will agree that you could eat. Where do we find such a thing? And this is halachic nemanus, because if the Metzias is either he took it or he didn't take it. If he took off the Rishon, then you started out with 11. If he didn't take off the Rishon, then you would argue even this Meiser Sheni should not be allowed to be eaten. But in halach, we don't always work that way. There is a logic to say that was removed from Meiser Sheni, everyone will agree is going to be completely misukin. Where do we find that? We find that by Bikurim. Let's quickly review the dinim of Bikurim. Bikurim means that when produce begins to grow, the person designates from the Shiva Saminim, you designate how much of it will you be giving or separating as Bikurim, which is like Truma. Once I made that original designation of it, can I later say, I want to add to the Bikurim? Why would you not be allowed to do so? I'll tell you why you would. Maybe you're not allowed to do so. Because the Bikurim itself doesn't have to have Truma removed from it, doesn't have to have any of the Maisras removed from it. The Bikurim is given to the Kohen and the Kohen gets to eat it. Midoiraisa, once you designated the Bikurim, that's it. You can't add to it. Nevertheless, the Chachamim gave me the koyach rabbinically, and that I could later decide to add to the Bikurim, and they call that Tosefes Bikurim. And the status of Tosefes Bikurim is that it has the din of Bikurim. It has the din of Bikurim l'chumra, that it has to be eaten betara. Has the din of the Bikurim that what? That, I'm speaking about the Mai, that the Tosefes Bikurim doesn't have to have any of the Trumos or Maestras removed from it, even when you get it from an Amma Aretz. Even when you get it from an Amma Aretz. In other words, the dinim of separating Trumos or Maestras from the Tosefes Bikurim proper is something that you don't have to do, and let's read it inside. So, Amar Rabbi Yosi, I'm going to tell you, Divrei HaKolim, that what? Osu oisoi Tosefes habikurim. Now, just the brisa that Rabbi Yosi is talking about, just to be clear, is a brisa that says that we believe in Amma Aretz to say, I redeemed my Meiser Sheni produce. And you believe him to eat the Meiser Sheni. Now, I want to know is, even though the brisa says that if an Amma Aretz says, I redeemed my Meiser Sheni, you believe him, can you eat that? Why would you maybe not be allowed to eat it? Because maybe he never removed Meiser Rishon. So the Gemara says lechatchila and the chanami. That's the machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. Haneman al Hasheni, whether he's neman al Rishon. And according to the Chachamim, if he's not neman al Rishon, then l'chayda this produce that he said he redeemed for Ma'aser Sheni, you can't eat. No, Amar Rabbi Yosi, that you can eat l'divrei hakoil, because that becomes like Tosefes Bikurim Daf Mem Gimel. That is that ma Tosefes Habikurim, even though biblically it's not Bikurim. But the Chachamim said that if you add to the Bikurim, it has the status of Bikurim. But they said it has a status of Bikurim all the way. Number one, Nechelas Bitara, that both the produce and the coin have to be pure. Okay, that's a Chumrah. That's easy. But the Chiddush is also Lokula. Upetura Midamai, we don't go ahead and say that that the coin now has to separate from the Bikurim Ma'aser. We don't say that. No. Whatever has to be separated midrabanan, they released when it comes to Tosefes Bikurim. So av ze nechal mishum sheni upatir min harishain. The Gemara is saying, Rabbi Yosi is saying that even if you're going to go with the shita that says hanemon al hasheni einoi nemon al harishain, very nice. But regarding the Ma'aser Sheni itself, we will allow you to eat it. And not everyone agrees with Rabbi Yosi. Also, Rabbi Chanina b'shem Rabbi Yosi. It's amazing, right? Now, this is Amar Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Chanina later came and said that Rabbi Yosi says that we don't compare it to Bikurim. Because don't forget that by Bikurim, all of that which the Chachamim could release is a Demai obligation. Demai is only a Chiyuv midrabanan. The Rabbanan can say, we exempt you from the Demai. Here, I know that the whole thing of not believing in Amoritz is a Derabanan, but we don't want to say it over here. That only the Braisa that says that we believe in Amoritz to say that I redeemed my Ma'aser Sheni, that Braisa also only follows Rabbi Eliezer. But according to the Chachamim that say Hanemon al Hasheni einoi nemon al Harishon, that Ma'aser Sheni itself, that Isser that he redeemed, that may not be eaten prior to you removing Ma'aser Rishon. So the machlokes that we have in our Mishnah isn't only how much did you start out with, how much more can you buy. It's even regarding the Isser's worth. You see an Amoritz redeeming a Isser's worth of Ma'aser Sheni onto an Isser. Can you get that? Also the machlokes. Because according to Beis Shammai, let's go in our Mishnah, according to our Beis Shammai, that no, you cannot. You can buy that Isser worth of produce. You don't have to worry about Ma'aser Sheni, but you still have to worry about Ma'aser Rishon, even for it itself. Gavaldik. And
but it seems like, I'm just thinking practically, right? It's like a Demai situation, right?
Mamish.
But it's not regular Demai, because regular Demai, you just make the separation and you're fine. But in this case, if it's actually Ma'aser Sheni, meaning let's say he already did the Ma'aser Rishon, you're now giving produce that needs to be eaten in Yerushalmi, and you're giving it to a Levi who's going to eat it in wherever.
Danny, I'll tell you better. What you're saying is right, but let's go more. Don't forget that whenever it comes to an Amoritz, Aviv, don't forget this. Whenever you do have to separate Ma'aser Rishon, it's not that you are giving the Ma'aser Rishon to a Levi. You never give it to a Levi. It means if I have an Isser's worth, let me tell you what's going to happen. I have to designate 10% of it Ma'aser Rishon, Karashem, and then I say that from the 10%, I am now separating 10% from it, L'trumas Ma'aser, and that you have to give to the coin. In other words, you're going to end up losing from the Isser 1/100th. And all the rest you're going to eat. But you have to do that. And the original Rabbi Yosi held that even though there's a machlokes in our Mishnah, whether you started out with more than the 10, but for this Isur, now this Isur, like Tosefes Bikurim, you're good to go. And here you have
but that Trumas Ma'aser, that one, whatever it is, that 100th,
yes,
2 100ths,
100th, not 200.
No, it needs to be given to a kohen.
Yes,
and I would say that kohen has to eat in Yerushalayim because it might.
No. Here he redeemed it. Here. No. Okay. Let me take a step back. Truma, and Trumas Ma'aser never has to have anything removed from it.
No, I understand.
Trumas Ma'aser,
if the guy really did separation of
Meiser
Meiser
Sheni
Rishon, if he already did Meiser Rishon, so now when you're separating this Trumas
is
Meiser in
garnished.
here, it's really nothing. What it is it's Meiser Sheni. Because
But
you're
no,
taking it from Meiser Sheni.
no, Danny, because Meiser Sheni, he removed. How do I know that he removed the Meiser Sheni? Because I saw him redeem the Meiser Sheni.
I know, but you're taking this from his Meiser Sheni.
Which is a good thing, which means that whatever you are removing will never have to be dealt with Meiser Sheni. The Meiser Sheni issue was resolved already. The coin that gets the 100th has no issue with Meiser Sheni.
I'm saying that 100th might actually be Meiser Sheni.
No, it's not, because if it was Meiser Sheni, it was already redeemed.
Don't we start with a premise that the Ama Aretz is good enough to at least take off Trumas Meiser?
No, we don't.
Isn't
that
what we learned in the Mai?
That's what we learned. We learned in the Mai that he understands the seriousness of Truma. So Truma Gedolah he removes. The Ama Aretz in his ignorance thinks that if he doesn't even remove Meiser Rishon, then he has no issue with Trumas Meiser. And the emes is that even if you don't remove Meiser Rishon, the fact that there is in a theoretical Meiser Rishon Trumas Meiser, it's just as serious as you not removing Truma Gedolah. Okay, now next Mishnah, Halacha Vav. Let's start. Daf Mem Gimel, right? So says the Mishnah, Nu Sugya. You found money. Kol Hamois Hanem Tzoin. When you find money, right, it sounds like all the money that you find. First of all, whoever's learning now is Askula, you're going to find money. Amen. A lot of money. Then he walked in, he's happy. Hare Elu Chulin. The presumption is not that it's a Meiser Sheni money. Now, hold on. It's not the way you think. Always that way. Look inside the top Marafulda. Kol Hamois Hanem Tzoin. So there's a caveat. What's all the money? Not all the money, all the money. Either Kol Hamois Hanem Tzoim Bechol Makoim, wherever, Bein Beregel, Bein Beshari Mois Hashana. Okay, but Bechol Makoim means not in Yerushalmi, in any place other than Yerushalmi, and Ubi Yerushalmi Beshari Mois Hashana Chutz Mi Mois Haregel. In other words, the Marafuld is telling you that if you find money in the streets of Yerushalayim during a Yom Tiv, we don't presume that the money is chulin, because the majority of the money in Yerushalayim during a Yom Tiv is Meiser Sheni money. So that's what the Mishnah means. Kol Hamois means if we're talking about 365, Liyamais Achama, 350, 354, 355, 82, 83, 85, whatever, Yemais Alavana. If we're talking about the whole year, then Kol Hamois Hanem Tzoim means outside Yerushalayim. If the Mishnah is not talking about Teregel, then it means Kol Hamois Hanem Tzoim anywhere in the world, outside Yerushalayim and Yerushalayim. So remember that. That's the meaning of Kol Hamois Hanem Tzoim. Now, there's a Chiddush. Says the Mishnah, Afilu dinari zov, im hakesev, im hamois, guys, mois means copper. Even if you find a pouch, a wallet, that has in it a mixture of different types of coins, not nickels, dimes, and whatever. No, we're talking about golden and silver and copper coins. And what's the chiddush? Again, the Marafulda, 4 lines from the top. She'ein derech la'arvon yachad. People don't normally mix different types of coins together. So why? In other words, there's circumstantial evidence why people normally they put the gold in one pouch, a silver in another pouch, copper in another pouch. Why is it all mixed together? Maybe because all of them were Meiser Sheni money. Since the all Meiser Sheni money, its owner, right now the Ziyush. Now the owner decided to put it together. We don't say that. And the Ikalameim, and I'm reading the Marafulda, the first narrow line, that halalu ma'ois, the money that you found, Shemaiser Sheni. Sheregilam lachalal hal meiser al din reizav and v'hanishar she'ena magil ladin reizav machalal el hakesef and v'hamoiser al hamoy shel nachoishes. We had that before. In other words, the guy started out with a golden coin, and he went and he bought a banana nushkoyach. So you have to break. So the guy broke down the big Trump $250 bill into $100 bill into different coins. And the guy kept it together because you keep your Meiser Sheni money. That might be why it's mixed together. So that's what the Mishnah is saying. When you find money, you don't presume that it's Meiser Sheni money. But if matzah b'toicham cheres, if you find in it, today it would be a little note. Those days they didn't have paper it wasn't the way it's today. So when people wanted to make a note on something that's relatively disposable, the cheapest of all utensils were earthenware utensils, especially if they cracked or broke. So if you had a cup or a plate or a pot and you can't use it, so you broke it into little pieces. Every piece is called a cheres, right? Sometimes spelled with a sin, sometimes spelled with a samach, and you engraved on it a letter. So even now, if you find in the pouch, together with the coins, whether they are gold, silver, copper, or whether they're only one type, if in the mixture of the coins there's a little shard, it's called shard. Here we go. You find on it the word meiser, or as we'll see, not only written meiser, just a mem. Then we say Hare Elo meiser. Now there's a chiddush on the other side, because one might have said, the coins are chulin. This guy also wanted to keep his cheres mem for later, from when he'll get later Meiser Sheni money. One might have said that we don't say. They would say, no. If you put a shard that has the word Meiser or the letter mem inside a pouch of money, it's not that shard is for you to be used later when needed. No, that's you using it currently. That's enough of evidence that the money that you found is Meiser money. Now, guys, don't forget, we're not learning Bava Metzia. What happens when you find money as a rule, normally? Money doesn't have a siman. Normally, I know that there are exceptions to that. You get to keep it. So we're not talking about who owns the money. Regardless, let's say in the case where there isn't a siman and you get to keep it. Okay, just because you get to keep it, it doesn't lose its Meiser Sheni sanctity if it's Mo'is Meiser Sheni. So you get to keep it, but you can only buy food with it. So now that we're speaking about money that has in it, in a pouch, in a bag, in a pot, whatever, in a bank, in a land bank, you have a note with Meiser. So that wasn't uncommon, that was common. But what were the other options were Hamoitzi Keli, what happens if you find a utensil, and because of olive korban. Now what's amazing, you have to know Jewish culture. We know legally what korban means, something that's going on the altar. Kalim don't go on the altar. A keli cannot be a korban. Many people used the word korban to indicate that this was consecrated lebedek habayis. They wrote korban. And that's what it meant. So if you find the keli, that on the keli you have the word korban, so it's like this. Now listen, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, if the keli is cheres, ironically, you know what we interpret? Not that the keli is bedek habayis. Whatever is inside the keli is hegdish. But if the keli itself was made out of a more valuable material, even if you found a keli made out of metal, filled with stuff, on the keli it said korban, we say the keli is hegdish, not what's in it. In other words, we assume that the label was only to the vessel. The less value the vessel has, so why would someone even care about this vessel? It's about the contents of the vessel. The more valuable the vessel is, the more mitzias that the vessel is, then we interpret that the label goes on the vessel. You know, we have something similar by Bikurim, now that we learned today about Bikurim, that the poor people who were unable to afford a wealthy basket when they brought their Bikurim, when they brought it in a wicker basket, what did we learn? They needed to give the wicker basket to the Kohen also. If you, the wealthy people that used to put the Bikurim in golden baskets, then they took their baskets back. That's where the Gemara says, from here, that's the statement that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The rich guy gets to keep his golden keli. The poor guy that barely can afford anything had a little wicker basket. He loses the wicker basket because the basket becomes bottled to the bikurim. The basket is the body, the bikurim is the neshama. The more humble a person is, the more the body becomes batal to the neshama. That's the Rebbe's word. Amrullah, that is, all this is Rabbi Yehuda. So the Chachamim tell Rabbi Yehuda, Ein derech b'nei yodam liois konsen chulin b'karben. Don't tell me that if the keli itself is a davar chashuv, if it's made out of mateches, then masha b'toichai chulin. We don't know such a thing. No one will put inside such a keli anything other than items that were also mugdash lebedek habayis.
Wait, so why don't we see the same thing here that we said about the Purim, that because you have just because you have like the nice box, that then doesn't mean that you're going to give it to the basement.
You dafka won't give it, but here the fact that you wrote. So Aviv is saying that I gave an example to make a kasha. If you have a cheres, keli, then if masha b'toichai hegdish, for sure, good. So then we'll leave it as a kasha, with no answer. Currently, we'll stop over here. Atkan is when you find a word korban, you find the word meiser. The next part of the Mishnah is to show you that people didn't spell it out. People were happy with the first letter, and they would write a kuf, and they would write a mem, and they would write a taf, as we will see, especially since there were times, sadly, that there was religious persecution. And during the times of religious persecution, people were afraid to do anything that is clear that you're practicing Yiddishkeit. So they would hide things by only writing its first letter, as we will see, God willing, tomorrow. To be